दुनिया के अंदर अगर कानून है तो उसकी पाबंदी सबको करनी चाहिए। अगर मशरिक वस्ता के अंदर वो फरमा रहे थे बड़ा खतरा है और कलामिटी हो सकती है अगर किसी और मुल्क ने, ईरान के अलावा अगर सऊदी अरब न्यूक्लियर वेपन लेना चाहे तो तबाही हो जाएगी, इसराइल का कोई जिक्र नहीं करता। हिंदुस्तान और अमेरिका की डील होती है तो सब खुश होते हैं, पाकिस्तान और चाइना की डील होती है तो हमसे मजीद मालूमात के तलबगार है। बहरहाल हमारे लिए बड़ा जरूरी है कि इस किस्म के मामलों के ऊपर आवाज बुलंद करते रहे। अफगानिस्तान, जब बरतानी सेक्रेटरी खारजा पाकिस्तान के अंदर मौजूद थे तो कल के रोज अफगानिस्तान के अंदर एक हमले में 4 बरतानी फौजी मारे गए। अफगानिस्तान के अंदर बरतानवी और अमरीकी इकट्ठे हैं और अमरीका और बरतानिया की कमिटमेंट एक दूसरे के साथ ऐसी ही है कि समझें कि एक ही मुल्क है जो 2 किस्म की अफवाज रखता है अफगानिस्तान के अंदर। क्या बरतानवी अब भी इस बात पर इसरार करते हैं कि जो कुछ अफगानिस्तान के अंदर हो रहा है वो दुरुस्त है, उन्होंने बड़ी प्रोग्रेस की है तो क्या प्रोग्रेस की है, और बरतानिया के फौजी यानी बरतानवी माओं के बच्चे अपने घरों में वापस कब जाएंगे और अफगानिस्तान में ये लोग कर क्या रहे हैं, किसके खिलाफ लड़ रहे हैं? ये हमने 4-5 सवाल उनसे इकट्ठे पूछे, देखते हैं इनका जवाब उन्होंने क्या दिया। Moving to more interesting places, Afghanistan. How do you see the future shape up in Afghanistan?
Well, of course, I hope, as the whole world hopes, that we will make progress now in Afghanistan.
That's the hope. What's the reality in Afghanistan?
Well, the reality is we are making some progress. I've been there a few weeks ago and seen in Helmand province, for instance, an improving security situation in many areas. There's no doubt about that. I was able to walk around in a town like Nadi Ali in Helmand, go to the bazaar, meet local people, which I don't think a visiting British minister could have done a year ago. So there is an improvement in the security situation. Of course, the international forces there are continuing to work on that. And it's important that there is a political process as well. And as you know, President Karzai has had the peace jirga recently. That has supported the idea of a reconciliation process. And now that Afghan-led process must now take place.
What's the UK policy on reconciliation itself? We know that you've supported, the London conference was big on reconciliation, has to be Afghan-led. But if this process were to include people like Mullah Umar and others, would UK support that?
Well, we support the Afghan constitution, Afghanistan having a legitimate government, people who want to be part of a legitimate government, renouncing any connection with Al-Qaeda and violent extremism. So those things are very important. So it really depends what other people are prepared to do. And that is also the position of the government of Afghanistan and of all our partners in NATO. So we want to see the people of Afghanistan have a legitimate constitutional government, widely supported. They have a government elected by the people. That is the government that must now lead this reconciliation process.
Karzai's second term, you spoke about people's government, widely supported, also responsive to people's needs. Is that the government that you have in Kabul as we speak?
Well, that is the government of Kabul. That is the government we must.
But that kind of a government which sort of lives up to that reputation of being.
It's not for us to say to Afghans who should be in their government and what their government should be.
This is exactly
like.
What you're telling to the Afghans by being there.
No, we're saying that there should be a democratic constitutional process respected by all. Remember, what we want to see in other countries is not a particular individual in power or out of power. It is strong institutions that allow that country to develop for the future. And that's always been our position on Pakistan, to support the growth of democratic institutions for the long term. That's something the United Kingdom has always stood for. And that's what we want to see in Afghanistan as well, and a political consensus around support for such institutions.
Let me draw on your deep interest in international politics. I know you have been deeply involved in looking at world affairs long before you landed this job and representing your country in this regard. Who are you fighting in Afghanistan at this point in time? What is the goal there? And what is the enemy?
The goal, I think, is quite simply stated. The goal is to arrive at the point where Afghans can look after their own security and their own affairs without any danger being presented to the rest of the world. We all know there was a danger from there when there were terrorist training camps in Afghanistan. We don't want to go back to that. So that is our objective. And that is our central objective. It's in our own national interest. It's in the interest of the wider world. When we have achieved that objective, then we do not need to have combat troops in Afghanistan.
Is there a cutoff point that you have in mind?
Well, no, because
or is it an open-ended commitment?
Well, you can't say, of course, when we will achieve that objective.
The Americans want to draw down in 2011.
Well, a drawdown is different from a withdrawal. President Obama has said, of course, that a drawdown of the increase in American forces, the surge that has taken place this year, will begin in July 2011. But that's quite different from setting a date for withdrawal and for achieving our final objective, that Afghans should be able to look after their own security. And it is because that's our objective that we are putting so much work into building up the Afghan national security forces, to training the Afghan police. That is all we seek, that Afghans will be able to govern themselves. That's the only interest that we have in Afghanistan.